Apparently they have arrived. Gentlemen, could I have you to the podium, please, to take the general salutes?
Parade! Attention! To the 16 Wing Commander Colonel Godbout and Lieutenant Colonel Meehan, Regimental Foresters, Commanding Officer, General Salute, salute.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 147, I'd like to welcome Second World War veterans Will Dwyer, George Ferris, William Snow, and Art Stiff. General Hayter, Members of Parliament Doug Shipley, Members of Provincial Parliament Doug Downey and Andrea Kanjan, Mayor Jeff Lehman from the City of Barrie, Councillor Carolyn Payne from the town of Innisfil, Wanda Ma Chapman, Township of Springwater, 16 Wing Commander Colonel Pascal Godbout, and Lieutenant Colonel David Meehan, Grey and Simcoe Foresters. Representatives of Canadian Armed Forces, and to all in attendance for joining us today in the remembrance of those who served our country so many years ago to give us the freedom that we have today. We are here to remember as well those whose lives were and are forever changed by the experience of war. My name is Tim Shaughnessy. I am the president of the Barrie branch of the Royal Canadian Legion, and together with Steve Glover, we will act as your masters of ceremonies for today's parade. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point I'd ask you to continue to stand for the singing of O Canada, led by Sandy Cumming.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love, with all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, a true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Et avalou, deux fois trompé, protégeront nos foyers, c'est nos droits. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Parade! Stand at ease! Stand easy!
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. At this time, I'd like to call on Colonel Pascal Godbout to come and give his address.
Honourable Doug Shipley, Member of Parliament, members of the Ontario Provincial Parliament, Mr. Doug Downey and Mrs. Andrea Kanjan, Your Worship, Mr. Jeff Lehman, our Second World War veterans present with us today, including Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Ferris, Mr. Snow, and Mr. Stiff, Lieutenant Colonel Meehan and Chief Warrant Officer Henley, Brigadier General Retired Ayers, Mr. and Mrs. Mackay, and other families present with us today who mourn the loss of a family member. Veterans, members of the Canadian Armed Forces, honorary colonels, city officials and first responders, cadets, distinguished guests. Thank you for joining us today in commemorating Remembrance Day. I'm proud of our men and women in uniform, and I'm honored to join with you today as we pay tribute to the veterans who served our country in the past. Their service and sacrifice are an inspiration and serve as concrete proof of our country's dedication to upholding peace, security, the rule of law, human rights, and other principles that underscore Canadian values. We enjoy freedom, equality, and prosperity because of them. Many of us here today have been affected by the loss of a family member or a friend who served in the Canadian Armed Forces. And Remembrance Day provides us an opportunity to gather as a community and pay our respect to the fallen and ensure that we remember their sacrifice. There's a very long and rich history of service and sacrifice by the members of the Canadian Armed Forces, but because this is a significant year, please allow me to focus on 3 milestone anniversaries we are commemorating this year. We are marking the 75th anniversary of D-Day. And on June 6, 1944, 150,000 Allied troops undertook a massive amphibious attack to gain a foothold in Normandy. We had 14,000 Canadian military members that took part in this operation. And on that single day, 359 of these Canadian soldiers, sailors, and aviators died and would never return home. Overall, 45,000 Canadians lost their lives during the Second World War. But many more came back bearing physical and emotional scars. We have few Second World War veterans left with us today, and sadly, we say goodbye to more each year. So as we take a minute of silence today, I would ask that you keep in your thoughts and prayers our local Second World War veterans to whom we've had to say goodbye. We are also marking the 70th anniversary of NATO. In 1949, 12 countries agreed to protect their common values of democracy and to maintain stability and peace in the North Atlantic region. And we've been doing that important work ever since. Hundreds of thousands of Canadian military members served in Europe alongside NATO colleagues during the Cold War. NATO has grown and now has 29 member countries and has faced new challenges since the end of the Cold War and the 1990s. And one of the challenges that we all remember are the terrible attacks that occurred on September 11, 2001, which brings me to our 3rd anniversary we are marking this year. After those attacks, Canada joined the mission to eliminate the terrorist threat in Afghanistan and bring peace and stability to its citizens. It was the biggest deployment of Canadian troops since the Second World War and ended just 5 years ago. Across the country, in our acts of remembrance this year, I know that many currently serving Canadian Armed Forces members like myself and many of the family and friends of our military personnel and veterans who have served in Afghanistan have that mission particularly on their mind on this Remembrance Day. We lost 158 service people in Afghanistan. We also lost 7 Canadian civilians and 40 American soldiers who were serving under Canadian command at the time of their death. We will remember them. And in closing, let's not forget the work that our soldiers, sailors, and aviators do at home. The sea patrols that are done throughout the year. Let's remember and give thanks to those who conduct air and maritime search and rescue operations, risking their lives so that others may live. Those who have gone across Canada to help deal with floods and forest fires, and those who defend our airspace 24/7 against potential threats. So on this day, November 11th, we pause and remember the men and women who have served our country, especially those who fought and died to achieve the freedom, security, and prosperity we enjoy today. Please help keep their memory alive and show your gratitude to the veterans who are still with us. We owe them all a debt we can only repay when we remember and honor them. Thank you.
I now call upon Lieutenant Colonel Meehan, Great and Simcoe Foresters, to give his address.
Good morning, everyone, and greetings from the Foresters. It's a tremendous honor and privilege to be here, and it's important for us all to remember all those things that the good Colonel has mentioned and everything that has gone before us. I'll leave it at that for today, but thank you very much for attending today and remembering along with us. Thank you.
Thank you, pardon me, to both Colonel Godbout and Lieutenant Colonel Meehan. At this time, I'm going to call upon Brian Lewis from the Army, Navy, Air Force Club to read in Flanders Fields.
In Flanders Fields, the poppies blow. Between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks still barely sing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow. Loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders Fields. Take up your quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw. The torch be yours to hold high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders Fields.
And now call upon our branch Padre Andrew Sandilands to lead us in prayer.
Parade! Attention! Remove headdress! Stand at ease! Stand easy!
As we pray for all who have died and those who continue to suffer as a result of conflict, we respond to each intercession by repeating, God lead us to peace. God, lead us to peace. In memory of the servicemen and women who have died in the violence of war, conflict, and terrorism, each one known to and remembered by God, we have the courage to say, God, lead us to peace. For those of us who love them in death as in life, offering the distress of our grief and the sadness of our loss, we have the courage to say, God, lead us to peace. For all members of the armed forces who are in danger this day, remembering family, friends, and all who pray for their safe return, we have the courage to say, God, lead us to peace. For civilian women, children, and men whose lives are disfigured by war, conflict, or terror, though they were not directly involved, we have the courage to say, God, lead us to peace. For peacemakers and peacekeepers who seek to make and keep this world secure, cooperative, and tolerant, we have the courage to say, God, lead us to peace. For all who bear the burden and privilege of leadership, political, economic, military, and religious, asking for gifts of wisdom and resolve in the never-ending search for reconciliation and peace, we have the courage to say, God, lead us to peace. Finally, as we call in mind the penitence, the anger, and hatred of all humanity, we remember it is difficult to be angry with the person we are embracing. We have the courage to say, God, lead us to peace.
Parade, attention! Replace headdress. Stand at ease. Stand easy.
Thank you, Padre Andrew. Ladies and gentlemen, please replace your headdress. I see you've done that. Good idea. On this day of remembrance, at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, we are calling on all assembled here to pause and pay silent tribute to the service of the many Canadians who paid the supreme sacrifice for our country by observing 2 minutes of silence. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand if you're able. We will observe the 2 minutes silence. We'll have last post first.
Thank you.
that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. We will now proceed with the laying of the wreaths. Laying a wreath on behalf of the Silver Cross Mother, Mrs. Elizabeth Mackay, mother of Private Kevin Mackay, 1st Battalion PPCLI, accompanied by her husband, Fred Mackay, and Parade Commander Fern Teifer. From the Governor of Canada, MP Doug Shipley, and from the Province of Ontario, MPs Doug Downey and Andrea Canchin. From the City of Barrie, Mayor Jeff Lehman. From the town of Innisfil, Councillor Carolyn Payne. And from the Township of Springwater, Wanda Maud Chapman. From 16 Wing Borden, Colonel Gadru and Chief Warrant Officer Lisa Harvey. From the Grey and Simcoe Foresters, Lieutenant Colonel Meehan and Chief Warrant Officer Dean Henley. Canadian Mounted Police, Inspector Freeman Swayze. From the OPP Barrie Detachment, Inspector Veronica Eaton. From the Barrie City Police, Chief Kimberly Greenwood. And from the Barrie Fire and Emergency Services, Fire Chief Corey Enterprise. From the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 147, First Vice President Marcel Villon. From the Canadian Forces Airborne Association, Boyd and Terry Robertson. From the RC. From the Ontario Provincial Police Association, Branch 18, John Carter. From the Barrie Police Association, President and Staff Sergeant Tom Sinclair. And from the Barrie Police Firefighters Association, Captain Jeff Bulch. And Gary Doran. From the Barrie Veterans Club, President Ron McKay. And from the UN Peacekeepers, Roger Alain and National Vice President Bob George. From the Canadian Naval Memorial, Dave Aspin, National Counsel and Chief Petty Officer Second Class, Dinah Meany. From the Navy League of Canada, President Barrie League Gita Purkis and Michael Cassidy, Honorable Lieutenant Commander. From the Royal Canadian Sea Cadets, Sub-Lieutenant Todd Rapper. From the Navy League Cadet Corps, Chambly, Lieutenant David Beach. From the 2919 Royal Canadian Army Cadets, Captain Alan Willoughby and Chief Warrant Officer Brian Jones. And from the 102nd Royal Canadian Air Cadet Squadron, Captain Barry Paul and Sergeant Kyle Sanders. From the Barrie Pipes and Drums, Drum Major Barry Goujon. And from the Hong Kong Veterans Association, in memory of Leo Berard, Victoria Lauder, and David Lauder. From the Royal Canadian Legion, Branch 147, Ladies Auxiliary, President Bonnie Whitnell. From the Army, Navy, Air Force, Ladies Auxiliary, Kathy Rochon. And from the Barrie British Club, Vice President Doreen Anderson. From the Kiwanis Club of Barrie, Doug McDermott, President. From the Kiwanis Club of Barrie Golden Cay, Robert George, past President. From the Kerr Lodge number 230, Gary McAloney. And from the Rotary Clubs of Barrie, Huron, and Kempenfeld, Craig Graham, Maria Weber, and Kirk Evans. From the Salvation Army, Captains Stephanie and Andrea Watkinson. Knights of Columbus, Bob Griffin and Paul Rosario. From the Barrie Council 1626 Knights of Columbus, Brother Victor Lefebvre. And J.J. Murphy Assembly, Willie Sivret, Flight Navigator. From the Simcoe County Elementary Teachers Federation, Sandra Woodrow Hewitt. From Trinity Anglican Church, Bill Sargent. And from Barrie Pride, David Bradbury. Frank Tascona, MM Medal recipient, Queen's Own Rifles, his son, Wayne Tascona. In loving memory of retired Honorary Colonel Bob Middlemiss, Greg Merrill, and Michael Jacoby. In loving memory of William George Hardy, Lori Hardy, and Krista Alkerton. And in memory of Ernest Mills and Percy Mills, Russell Mills. In memory of El Zaba, granddaughter Courtney Peters. In memory of Harry Hobbs and Gord Hobbs, Wayne Hobbs. In memory of Jack Skipper Jordan, Leslie Laundrie. And in honor of Lieutenant Colonel Donald George, grandson Staff Sergeant Kevin McLean. HGS Canada, Stephen Ronk, and Libby Torrance. From Business and Professional Women, President Joanne Bullock Fernandez, and Kimberly Roundtree, Central District Director. From Royal LePage First Contact, Lloyd Jensen. From the Habitat for Humanity, Gary Hironia, Lisa Voici, and Tasha Hudson. Le Corsier family, granddaughter Chief Petty Officer Jose Le Corsier. And from Scouts Canada representatives.
Pray and ask for God's blessing. Our God of truth and justice, we hold before you those whose memory we cherish and those whose name we will never know. Help us to lift our eyes above the torment of this broken world and grant us the grace to pray for those who wish us harm. As we honor the past, may we put our faith in your future, for you are the source of life and hope, now and forever. Amen. And may the peace of our Lord God live always in your hearts, and be shown forth in all you do, and be demonstrated toward all whom you meet. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise if you are able for the singing of God Save the Queen, led by Sandy Cumming. Then we'll have the march past. As the parade is leaving, can I ask you to please make room and allow the city bus to come through to pick up the veterans.
God save our gracious Queen, long live our noble Queen. God save the Queen, send her victorious, happy and glorious, long to reign over us. God save the Queen.
Parade will march past in Column Road. Move to the right in Column Road.
Oh no, it's today. Today's my birthday. Oh, everybody's today. November 11th. Yeah. Today's your birthday. Today's my birthday. I can never forget my birthday.
Let's go in. So John, this building holds a lot of memories for both of us, our whole careers, our whole lifetimes, but it was so much more before that. Could you just have a look around here and tell us what this building is and what would go on in here? What was this building used for, and how was it used in 1916?
Well, I think if you look at 1916 and you look at 2016, 100 years later, the usages are very, very similar. And an easy way to look at an armory is like a ship. It's self-contained. It has everything in it. So this is a training area, being the drill floor. So drill is taught on this floor. Basic marksmanship has been taught on this floor. It's been used for accommodation. We have wonderful photos from 1915-16 of wooden bunks set up on this floor for B Company and of the 157th, as well as I think the 76th Battalion, who actually lived in here. And you can contrast those to modern pictures with the troops living on cots here before deploying on a weekend exercise. We even have pictures of the United States Marine Corps unit on this floor training with us. So as we look around the building itself, so if we look, this is the east side of the building. So the top floor are the two messes. So the officers' mess is up to my left. The warrant officers and sergeants' mess is to the right. Below it is the orderly room for the regiment and ops and training. And on the left here is the junior ranks mess, where the privates, corporals, and master corporals, that's their home away from home. The other side of the building, if we look to the west end, is the classroom, and the large one in the upper floor there to my right. And probably every forester that's been since 1915 is trained in that classroom.
That is where I did my first aid class, was right in that room.
And I did too.
Yeah.
And it's used, every night of the week now, as it probably was back then. Usage of the building has changed a little bit more on the west end, in that the opposite end to the classroom used to be the caretaker's apartment.
That's right.
It's now regimental headquarters, but if you go up there, the walls are still the same. So there's still the dining room, the living room, the master bedroom, the kitchen, and of course they've been converted to office use and conference rooms since those days. But the caretaker used to live in
He did indeed. When we were doing drill on the floor, he and his family would sometimes be watching us from the balcony from upstairs. Yeah.
For sure. And then also on the west end, on the main floor, there's other classrooms. There used to be the weapons vault. It's since been moved. Recruiting's over there, quartermaster stores. And the basement at the west end used to actually, as you remember, have a .22 rifle range down there, which until days of environmental and breathing all that bad air in has killed it. And now it's actually a computer simulated range, so the soldiers can practice their weapon skills without actually having to go outside, which is kind of cool.
Which is good.
At the other end of the building, it's kind of neat because it shows changes in technology. There used to be 4 large boilers that heated this place with coal, and you can still see the chimneys on either end. I think there's only one being used now, and these huge boilers have been reduced down to a single little unit that now heats the entire building. So all this space that in the past in the basement was devoted to coal and boilers and furnaces is now like cadet offices and additional storage and stuff like that in the building.
So and it's green.
And it's very green compared to what it was.
Okay, so I see up there on the balcony historical displays, and perhaps maybe we could go up there and have a look at those, and you could talk to us about those. Yeah, I can remember when we didn't walk across this floor.
Oh yeah.
It was sacred ground.
Yes, it was.
You had to go around the outside, you know?
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
When I get up in the morning, the first thing I do is put on my yarn.
Jaylen's been able to have the prosthetics and have the support that she needs because of the people who donate to the war amps.
My arm helps me to pick flowers.
She can do things on her own. She doesn't need someone else to do it for her.
I love all the pretty colors of flowers, but yellow's my favorite color.
Could you use some extra cash? Tune in to McLaren Arts Center TV Bingo on Rogers TV for your chance to win. We have $2,500 in prizes up for grabs every Tuesday night. 5 ways to play, 20 chances each night, but only one way to win. Tune in to McLaren Arts Center TV Bingo, Tuesdays at 8 p.m. only on Rogers TV.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
So, John, this is almost like a museum. Well, I suppose it is a museum, really, isn't it? What does this represent?
Well, what we've done is the museum is actually broader than just the building, the 1885 Armory on Mulcaster Street, in the fact that we have more exhibits than we can display in that building, and we actually started out displaying them in this one. So the museum is actually spread between the two armories, and there are artifacts in almost every room. So not just out here on the drill floor and on the balconies, but there are historic photographs hanging all over the place. And the reason being is that the Army's always been about history. We're just passing through. This regiment now is 150 years old, and so it's to you, we pass the torch type thing. And so the troops can see their own history walking around the building. So what we have in this cabinet are a tunic and wedge cap from the the Second World War.
Here.
Gray and Simcoe. And then from the 1970s are pipes and drums that lasted for a few years and now have been reestablished. And it's a Hunting Stewart tartan was our regimental tartan, and Base Borden has adopted the same tartan in reflection of the 157 Simcoe Foresters, so that the two pipe bands can actually parade together and look almost the same because they wear the same tartan. And the different headdresses are across the top from different periods of regimental history. So Tony, in addition to what's in here in the cabinets, that sort of a museum annex, the entire building is a museum. So if you look around on the walls, for example, over here, just completed as part of our 150th anniversary with a lot of blood, sweat, and tear, literally, was the compilation of the war dead from both counties with the regiment. And this was a mystery, especially from World War I. So now there's over 500 names on the Roll of Honor there. And that's been a major piece of archival work to determine those that we lost in the mainly the First World War, because the 4 battalions were broken up for reinforcements. Mm-hmm. While the records are wonderfully kept by National Archives, cross-referencing them to Grey County and Simcoe County was very difficult, and that's been done.
But 500 names on those 3 scrolls.
Yes.
That's for the entire history of the regiment. That's 150 years worth of service and sacrifice.
That's right.
500 names.
With 2 beginning in the South African War of 1899 to 1902. So they're the very first war dead, one from each county. So James Finley was from here in Barrie and was one of the very first casualties of the South African War. And his name is right at the top of those panels.
All right. Well, let's have a look around the building and see what else there is that we can see.
So also with the 150th, we built the arch, which is over the doorway, and that was what the troops marched through in Owen Sound for the presentation of new colors by the Governor General.
And I was there. I saw that. Very excellent. Yes.
On the other wall, these panels have been up for a number of years, is the lineage of the regiment over its 150 years, and the coat of arms of Canada, which actually came off the Barrie Post Office when it was being taken down. So we've preserved that, and that's the sort of focal point of the parade square when the drill hall is used as a parade square.
So new recruits coming in to join the Grey and Simcoe Foresters can actually learn about the history of the regiment right in this very building where they do their military training.
Yes, they can walk around the building, they can see the lineage, how the regiment has served Canada in all its different roles since 1866. They can see the battle honors that are emblazoned on both the arch, and below us is the big badge on the floor, and it has the battle honors on either side. And the panel over to the right beside the classroom has the badges of all the regiments and battalions that the Grey and Simcoes perpetuate since 1866.
And the battle honors, of course, now include the new ones that you have received, like from Afghanistan.
Afghanistan, yes.
Excellent.
And one missing one being Hill 70, which is taking on greater importance in Canadian history this year as we get into the 100th anniversaries of the First World War.
Growing up, I just felt this hatred for myself, and I stopped planning for the future because I didn't think I had one. Without United Way and the generosity of the whole organization, I don't even really know where I'd be.
Coldwater was the perfect town to host a steampunk festival because it already is a steampunk village. We have the historic grist mill, stone library, we have the authentic historic main street, and we actually are the only festival that takes an entire village and steampunks it for a day. Steampunk is Victorian industrial or retro futurism, all based in a spirit of fun and play. There seems to be an abundance of local artists and very, very creative people in an idyllic, authentic, historic village.
So we're coming into the officers' mess of the regiment here, and when I come into a room like this, I honestly don't know where to start because history and tradition is all around me. Tell us something about what's in here, John.
Well, this is the home of the officers away from home, and it's also an annex of the museum in the sense that there's so much history on the walls in here. And it ranges from historic photographs back to the early days of the regiment. In fact, one here that's very rare from Valcartier in 15. There's a project undergoing, a national project to identify all the people in it. We've identified some of the Greys and Simcoes in the photograph. There's others more up to date. The regimental silver's in here. The regimental silver is, as you are aware, is donated by officers usually as they're retiring or leaving the unit. And in some regiments, they get so much of it, they have auctions and have to sell it off. We're the other way. We are missing a great deal of silver that was hidden during the Second World War and never recovered, which is very different than if you go in the officers' mess in Owen Sound, where the 31st Grey silver goes way back into the 1800s. We can't claim that. Although we have some old pieces. That shooting trophy that's like a chalice and it's lined in gold is from the 1880s, I believe.
I remember a very interesting story about that because when I started my career here in the unit, I was also a newspaper reporter. And I remember there was a story in the Barrie Examiner about a lady who had found that in a trunk in her house. It was her father's or her grandfather's or something. And it had gone missing. With a very interesting story. And the story is that the officer who had it in his possession was going over to Europe. He was down at the railway station in Allendale. He was getting ready to get on the train. The train was leaving without him. He ran to get on the train. He slipped and fell under the wheels and was killed. And that trophy remained hidden for half a century until it was discovered. And there it is again, once more on public display. And there are the regimental colors. Perhaps we should go and talk about those since they're brand new this year.
We'll talk about the new ones, and then we'll talk about the other set that goes back to the founding of Borden in 16. So this set of colors, only infantry regiments carry standard colors. They belong to the sovereign in perpetuity. So the one on my right here is the regimental color. It represents a soldier's loyalty to the regiment. It bears the badge of the unit, the motto of the unit if we have one, and we do. Actually, the motto is an honor on its own, almost like a battle honor.
Tenacious and versatile.
The battle honors of the regiment are on the colors, and the most recent being Afghanistan. And it's interesting that when Ottawa designed the new colors, Director of History and Heritage, they put Afghanistan under our original one, which was Northwest Canada 1885. So it's sort of like the alpha and the omega here.
The first and the last are there at the bottom.
And we have just returned from an overseas battlefield tour trip as part of the 150th, and we visited all the battle honors from the First World War, which are the other 6 that are on the colors. There's actually 7 because the Arras is combined, which is Vimy Ridge, 17, and then Arras in 18. There are also new baldricks, which were designed by the then Major Ritterschoffer, now the new commanding officer, which have the regimental baldric or color belt, has all the battalions and regiments that the Grey and Simcoes perpetuate since its beginning, as well as all the battle honors, has the royal cipher of Her Majesty the Queen, the badge of the regiment, and the royal cipher of the Colonel-in-Chief, Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal Princess Anne, who gave us permission to put them on the baldric. So if you look on the other side now, this is the Queen's color, which represents the soldiers' loyalty to the sovereign, and the Queen's baldric, or Queen's color baldric here, again, it has the royal cipher of Her Majesty, the regimental badge, the motto, and the royal cipher of Princess Anne. Behind it is a gift from the outgoing honorary colonel, and signed by Princess Anne is a illuminated scroll that's all hand done. It's an artist that did it professionally, sent over to the palace for signature and sent back, and it tells the story of the regiment and the new colors in the presentation by the Governor General on the 20th of May of this year at Owen Sound.
So there's a tremendous amount of history just in this one case alone.
There is, and in fact, most people don't realize these are not flags, they're colors, and as such, they're consecrated. They're sacred, they're only moved under armed escort, they're only carried by officers, they're never removed from the cabinet without an armed escort to take them out of the mess. So you can see, sitting here are the covers for the tips of the bayonets of the escort, so they don't catch and rip the colors on the points of the bayonets. And of course, above the cabinet is a portrait of Her Majesty.
Right.
So those are the new set. The biggest thing of them is the facings are the correct color now.
Mm-hmm. That is Lincoln green.
Green, yes. And you and I were both on the presentation of colors in '78, which we just retired those colors, and they're the wrong shade of green. So we finally have the correct color for the colors, which is...
And those colors are going to be laid up sometime in the next year, I understand?
In 2017, and they'll be in Owen Sound. They were presented there, so they're going to be laid up in St. George's Church at the foot of the hill down from the Armories, and the congregation there very much wants them, so they can display them and tell the story behind them.
Now, when a regiment lays up its colors, it was traditional at one time to always lay them up in a church. That's not the case anymore. They can't be laid up in other places, can they?
They always could be. So you'll see them sometimes in city halls, county council buildings. Traditionally, it's been churches because the architecture tends to lend itself to display.
Big high ceilings.
Big high ceilings, which is why we wanted St. George's in Owen Sound. It's a Gothic church, so it'll display them very nicely. But it's often the architecture helps as much as anything.
And in fact, down in the little rammed earth church in Shanty Bay, there is a set of colors from the Simcoe Foresters, is there not?
That's right. The 1932 Simcoe Forester colors are in St. Thomas Anglican Church in Shanty Bay. And the colors that were from 1908 that were in Collingwood and All Saints, they were reclaimed in 2000 by the regiment, and they're in the Mulcaster Street Armories. And they're in terrible condition, so they're in special conservatory boxes for display, but very much worth looking at.
Okay. So we've talked about what's on the colors, what the colors are made of, when they were presented, where they're laid up, and this kind of thing. What are colors? How would you define them?
Well, it's pretty simple now that they're symbolic, but originally they had a very practical purpose in the fact that it was a rallying point on the battlefield. If you think back to the days of soldiers in straight lines and needing to be able to recognize where they were supposed to be, soldiers rallied on the colors. And each regiment or battalion had its own colors. Distinctive, the soldiers could see them. In fact, the ceremony of trooping of the colors is so soldiers can recognize their own colors and know the rallying point. Now, the last time they were carried in combat was sometime, I think, before the First World War, maybe the early 20th century. And since then, they're no longer allowed to be taken into theater. They're deposited in safekeeping or kept in the rear areas of the unit while it's deployed. what initially a very practical purpose. Today it's very symbolic and represents before and the future and now.
So that's the real meaning of the expression "rally to the colors."
It's exactly where it comes from.
From battlefield.
Battlefield.
Yeah. Hang on. All right. Well, we've been talking about First World War. These are modern. There's another set of colors over here that are very meaningful and very historic.
This, from a community point of view, this stand of colors is probably one of the best kept secrets in the county, in that the 157th Battalion Simcoe Foresters, which is credited with building Camp Borden in the spring of 1916, so we claim to be the founding unit of Borden, they did receive colors before they went overseas. They got these in October of 1916, and after the war they were laid up in St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church here in Barrie, and then when it was in architectural distress many years ago, I believe it was in the early 70s, it may have been even the late 60s before the church was fixed, they were given to the Simcoe County Archives and then to the Simcoe County Museum, and then they were returned to the regiment. So that's why they're back where they started, and here they are, and they're in excellent condition. While it looks like they're faded, they actually aren't. They have a very fine white mesh on them that someone's put on at great cost. It's a conservatory measure, and that protects them. So they're in actually much better condition than, let's say, the 1908 colors that are down in the at the Mulcaster Street Armories, which are in terrible condition. These are good enough to carry today.
And they'll probably still be here in another 100 years.
I hope so.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
Did you know that a second of fun in the wrong place could change your life forever? Lots of kids in our child amputee program lost their limbs in accidents. Now, we help kids to play safe by sharing our stories and spreading our safety message. Take from us. We've been through it. Accidents can happen to anyone, anywhere.
Don't let it happen to you.
Spot the danger before you play. Play safe.
On Rogers TV, we have a reality show like no other. It has a great cast of characters. Some you may have even helped land the role. Each episode has something different. Plans are devised, decisions are made, votes are cast, and money is spent. It's local reality TV that you won't want to miss. And it's exclusive to Rogers Cable customers. Catch your municipal council coverage on Rogers TV. Visit rogerstv.com for broadcast details.
Color party, by the left, quick, march!
If you were to ask the people of Barrie, where's the nearest military unit? They would probably say